In the first chapter of Black Clover, Asta receives a 5th leaf clover grimoire that houses a devil of anti-magic power, giving him swords imbued with anti-energy. With anti-magic, Asta can nullify the spells of his opponents. This was Asta's gimmick for the majority of the series, and we'd see him get even more anti-magic swords with different abilities. He would learn his own version of reinforcement magic with this energy, including getting to the point where he can fuse with the anti-magic devil into his devil union form, where he gets covered in anti-magic armor. With Asta having the ability to nullify magic itself, and many statements claiming that he can negate any magic no matter how strong it is, it has led to countless claims by both fans and detractors of Black Clover that Asta and his anti-magic is overpowered, and that he was never an underdog because of this. Now, I'll be making an entirely different video on Asta being an underdog, but this is probably the biggest criticism of Asta as a character and Black Clover as a series. Anti-magic is too overpowered for the series to be enjoyable, or at the very least, it detracts from the quality of the series. I find this funny because anti-magic was never overpowered, and I can prove that too in many different ways. It is not overpowered in the beginning of the series. Early in the series, the middle of the series, later on in the series, and even currently in the series. Anti-magic is actually a very balanced ability that took Asta years of hard work, dedication, outside help, and goddamn forbidden magic rituals just to get to the point to where you can still be one-shot by characters who aren't even the strongest in the verse. Like, seriously, I think what happens is that people just believe anything of what anime reviewers are saying these days, like they're zombies. Which, speaking of zombies, joined the zombie unit, an elite Hong Kong police squad, on a mission to uncover a major corporate conspiracy and a hidden gem, the video game Wanted Dead. Wanted Dead is a cyberpunk hack-and-slash game with the spirit of PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 era titles, with amazing combat that combines both sword and gunplay, leading to a very fun and rewarding experience. And it's the first game from the brand new publisher 110 Industries that is focused on story-driven single-player games. One of the aspects that I like about Wanted Dead is that it can be beaten in a single weekend of fun, as it takes 8 to 10 hours on average to beat. This is refreshing with all the massive 70+ hour open world games that are dropping every month. As someone with a very busy schedule like mine, I can't help but enjoy a game that I can actually reasonably beat. If you're a sucker for boss fights like me, then you will love Wanted Dead, as each and every level ends with a boss with a different style of moveset that you have to master. While you don't need to be a professional gamer by any means, there is a learning curve to the combat in the game that makes it fun to master. One of the coolest parts about this game is that there are anime cutscenes, like MAPPA quality anime cutscenes, which is so refreshing to see in a game of this style. Wanted Dead is wacky, comical, and most importantly fun. There are many crazy minigames here, including karaoke,
Hast du etwas Lied vermischt? Dancing ist nicht für dich. Wander dancing gegen Luftballons auf ihrem Weg zum Horizont.
I trust you've had the opportunity to encounter the enchanting allure of the one-of-a-kind game, Wanted Dead, as I have some exciting updates to share with you. Time is of the essence, as Wanted Dead is currently being offered at the extraordinary 50% discount on PlayStation. This special promotion will be available until August 2nd. And if you happen to prefer other platforms, worry not, as you can also find it on Xbox, Steam, and the Epic Games Store. Don't pass up on this incredible offer. Seize it now by following the link provided in the description. Now, before getting into the video, I think it's very important to even discuss overpowered and what that should even mean. I think we must define the term before we can even begin discussing whether anti-magic is overpowered or not. There is no set definition of what defines overpowered in this context, so I think it is best to try and look into these critiques and see what they mean by it. I've seen many comments, and oftentimes people will say that Asta is too overpowered because he's been given the most broken power in his verse. So I'm gonna go with that definition because that's the most often one I see. But I will make a definition of what it seems most people often mean when they say that an ability or a character is overpowered. So here's my definition. The term overpowered, when it's used in the context of a fictional battle or universe, a character, ability, or item, etc. that is so powerful, useful, or versatile that it consistently makes all other powerful characters, abilities, or items seem weak, one note, or useless in comparison, with little or no cost to use relative to the power displayed. The reason why I think this justification works is because, for example, Asta's anti-magic swords, if they're not constantly making other things seem weak, and if I can actually prove that there is a great cost to having anti-magic, then there is no way that overpowered should ever be allowed as a sound critique of anti-magic in Black Clover. For example, something can be very powerful, but if there is a massive cost to it, then it shouldn't be overpowered. If one dies through the use of a very powerful spell, then that's a high cost unless it's not overpowered. If using the ability renders all of your power useless, then there is a high cost. If you have to spend over half a year focusing on a single spell that can only be used once, then it's not overpowered. Now I will tackle what really is the main criticisms, and that is that they say Asta becomes too overpowered immediately in chapter or episode 1, when he is chosen by the 5-leaf Clover Grimoire, getting his anti-magic swords and then one-shotting Rebchi, who was once an established magic knight, but has now gone rogue. Asta's goal was to become a magic knight so that he could one day become the Wizard King, but now he's defeated a magic knight already. But let's analyze the 5-leaf Clover Grimoire and see how much it carried Asta in this situation. But first, it's important to go over the requirements for even being chosen to wield this grimoire and the swords within. You need to be physically strong enough to wield the swords. This is a hard task because even people who are strong and use magic to further reinforce their muscles struggle with wielding even the lighter anti-magic sword of the Demon Dweller. Like Ladros being one of the strongest physical characters in the verse, and he's also one of the best at reinforcement magic, yet he struggles to pull out the Demon Dweller. Oh, and don't forget, you yourself cannot use magic to reinforce your muscles to wield this sword. No, you must forsake your magic power and live a life without that energy source, which acts as a twofold cost. If you never have mana, you don't know how to manipulate energy. Anti-magic is an energy, and it does work similarly to how mana and how you develop it, as stated by Gaja, meaning that you, or Asta in this case, will have very stunted growth with developing this anti-magic power. But also, because the Clover Kingdom is a very class-based society, and class and reputation is based primarily off of your level of magic power and your type of magic, this means that in order to wield anti-magic, you must force yourself to endure endless discrimination. Not only that, you do not get a sixth sense in mana sensing, so you have to physically train for 10 years every single day, including training with the most talented mage in your village and running through tornadoes that he throws at you. Also, you train in a grand magic region. Yeah, Asta did 1,000 one-arm handstand push-ups in a grand magic region. That's because it's shown that the skull takes place in the Grand Magic region. Grand Magic regions are so powerful that even established magic knights need to use a higher level of reinforcement magic, mana skin, in order to move through them. Furthermore, the first sword and only sword that comes with the grimoire is so heavy that it slows you down and makes you even slower than your base speed. All these costs are just for these little benefits. You get a large, dull sword that acts as a club, making it just a force multiplier. This sword also has power nullification with the anti-magic, that it negates the magic when it's touched. The issue is that magic still produces a physical force. The anti-magic does not negate the physical force that it emits, just the magic that produced it, meaning that whatever incoming magic you need to negate, if you are not strong enough to counter its physical force, you are done for. This is stated in chapter 5 of the manga that Asta cannot negate the physical force that the magic produces. This is further nailed down in chapter 50 when Asta wants to go against Patri's Ray of Divine Punishment, but Yami says he wouldn't be strong enough to reflect the force and only his swords would be left behind. So what that means is that if someone far stronger than Asta launches an attack at him, he might be able to negate the magic itself, but it still would affect him, damage him, or even kill him. Mind you that when Asta first gets anti-magic, it does not even amplify his physical stats, not until he gets his black form many chapters later. And even when he gets help from Magna and Noelle in a fight, Asta still struggled against Heath, and he got kinda messed up. So if anti-magic was overpowered, how did he struggle against his opponent, even if he had help? And if we actually look at why Asta beat Rebchi, it has little to do with anti-magic. See, after Yuno instills Asta's confidence in himself, Asta actually believes that he can defeat Rebchi. This is before he even gets his grimoire. Now people always took Asta's statement here as him just spewing nonsense, but there's no reason to assume that. Sure, Asta doesn't sense magic, but he's always been able to tell when a magic is strong by seeing it or fighting it. And remember, at this point he has spent 10 years sparring with Yuno, and 10 years training in the Grand Magic region against the effects of mana, and likely encountering magical beasts. He also just fought Rebchi, so he knows how strong Rebchi is. And if you actually look at the fight, he actually fought decently against Rebchi despite being down on his luck from his depression of not having received a grimoire. Also remember, we know that the Slayer sword slows Asta down, and that is why he needed the Dweller to beat Mars later on. This means that whatever Asta's speed with the sword is, his base speed is even faster. And we see that when he fights Rebchi the second time, he is far faster than him, meaning that even if Asta didn't have his anti-magic in the second round, he would still be so much faster than Rebchi that he would have a significant advantage. And don't forget, Rebchi's main ability was that he sealed people's magic power, meaning that his most advantageous ability was meaningless to Asta. So it's not like Asta beat some senior magic knight with amazing combat spells. He was fighting a magic knight that was probably one of his best possible matchups. For the vast majority of the early series of Black Clover, Asta always needed help to win. Against Heath, he needed Magna and Noelle. Against Mars, he needed Yuno, Luck, Mimosa, Noelle, etc. Against Baro, he needed help from Teresa and Gauche. As remember, Gauche needed to activate Mirror Brigade so that there were over 10 clones of Asta on the battlefield. Against Veto, Asta would have been done for without the help of Vanessa and Finral. And even when they thought they had won together, they still hadn't, and they needed Yanni's help to actually win. If Anti-Magic was so overpowered, why was Asta struggling with the majority of his fights, even when he had help in those fights? Then people will retort, saying that, oh, well, once Asta gets more swords and his black form, then he's overpowered. Okay, well, let's analyze that. Asta needs more swords to get overpowered. Okay, well, the grimoire only came with one. He earned all of the others. He fought through a dungeon and found the Demon Dweller sword, a sword that even after finding 300 plus chapters ago, he still hasn't mastered its main ability of resonating with the people you have bonds with and copying their magic power. Sure, now Asta can absorb enemy attacks and launch it back at them, or just launch anti-magic slashes, but even then that took 200 chapters of training, or 2 years of training in verse to be able to do that. Remember, that's not the true power of the Dweller. The Dweller let Licht absorb the power of his allies without actually draining their power. Asta still cannot do this at will. He's done it on accident with Gauche and Noelle early in the series, but he doesn't do it anymore. And then he gets the Demon Destroyer sword, which is his best sword, but he still earns it by knocking it out of the hands of the Chieftain of the Elves. Granted, it is a very powerful sword, but it's still not overpowered, and we will get into that deeper in the video. The Demon Slasher Katana is basically just finally a sword for Asta that isn't heavy, that he can just wield like a normal sword, that grants him the ability to cut what he chooses, and doesn't cut the people that he cares about. But he earned that sword by Yami giving it to him so that he could end Dante once and for all. Alright, let's talk about the black form. Oh, it's so overpowered, right? And now I will agree that it's very strong, but it's not overpowered. It finally gives Asta his own reinforcement magic, but with anti-energy instead of mana, of course. He can fly now and is surrounded in anti-magic, and he's way more powerful and stronger. If you use data books or calculations, he's at least 4 to 6 times stronger when he's in this form. And he does go on to defeat Spirit Ladros, who is a general who absorbed the Fire Spirit, and Asta defeat him easily in the manga. But this is just another case of matchup. Sure, Black Asta is just as strong and fast as Spirit Ladros. Actually, he's even more powerful, but the reason why it was a stomp is because Ladros was just pure magic power. He had no real attribute. All he could do was absorb magic and emit it. He couldn't do that to Asta. He had no real spells to combat Asta's ability and power advantage that he held. But still, even again, this is another case of Asta still not even being the strongest. As after he fought Ladros, Asta would get another buff from the Witch Queen, in which she would heal him, but also makes his body even stronger. The previous time was such a large increase to Asta that it was as if he had reinforcement magic on top of his physical strength. After this, he trains to learn how to activate his black form at will, and then he gets outsped by a holding back Meryliona, and he gets one shot. So you have Meryliona, who is at best the second strongest in the kingdom, meaning that if you went at the whole verse of Black Clover, she'd be way lower than the second strongest. So Asta, with his black form, still wasn't even close to the strongest. Not only that, but there are significant drawbacks to the black form. For one, Asta can only use it for 5 minutes, twice a day at first. Not only that, but the anti-energy running throughout his body actually hurts him and make his bones creak once he's out of black form. So he has to actually withstand the power of black form, and it does drain him. Furthermore, Asta can't even control himself in this form. If there is a strong magic in the area, his anti-magic will be magnetized to it. This can and has been taken advantage of where people play him like a puppet by just placing their magic around the battlefield, and Asta just can't even help himself, as the anti-magic has to go destroy it like it's magnetized to it. Is the black form powerful? Yes, but it's not even close to being the strongest, and it has a cost to using it. How many times have we seen Asta get smoked while using his black form? Even the higher versions of the black form get bodied in the manga or anime all the time. Black form too, Berserk. Even Asta's newest full black form just gets one shot by Ichika. Let's also not forget that Asta can't even activate it of his own will at first. The Witch Queen actually activated it for him during the first use. And later on, Asta would need to use ki sensing to actually be able to sense anti-magic and allow for the energy to flow. Now, from here on out, we're going to be discussing a lot more manga-exclusive content, so be warned for the spoiler warning. We get people saying that, finally, just now, that Asta is overpowered. That's because he has Devil Union and can completely encase himself with anti-magic. He can now shut off people's magic power and can still have True Devil Union on top of that, and Zetten too. So, with all this, is Asta now finally overpowered? Well, what we actually see with Devil Union is that while it sure is very powerful, it's still not overpowered. Sure, he defeats an ancient demon and the twin devils, but he gets made a fool of by Lucifero, even though Lucifero was using a fraction of his power. Even when Asta gets help from the amped captains, it still isn't enough. Asta would eventually need True Devil Union to defeat Lucifero. But even then, he only actually won because half of Lucifero's physical strength and magic power were left in the underworld, because he's only half manifested. Lucifero even believes that he would have won if he had his full power. So even when True Devil Union was introduced, it wasn't the strongest in the verse. It was still behind 100% Lucifero. But I will not lie, it is definitely very, very, very powerful, but there still is a cost. The first cost is that it's easy to see is that Devil Union only lasts for 5 minutes. And then once it's done, Asta has to wait 30 minutes for it to recharge. Not only that, but Asta can't even access his regular black forms during this 30 minutes, and his body is also very worn down. But this doesn't even include the true cost, where in order to go Devil Union, Asta had to defeat his anti-magic devil in a one-on-one combat with none of his powers. Asta with one arm, one sword, and no anti-magic was forced to fight Liebe, the anti-magic devil. If he lost, Liebe would have to take his body, and Asta would be lost forever. But even though Asta won, there was no easy path. Instead of a conventional devil binding ritual where he would hold dominion over Liebe, he opted for a devil friending ritual where they would be equals in the contract, thus making it even harder for Asta to draw out the true anti-magic and devil union. Even after making the contract, he needed to train for days with Noct, being pushed to the brink of death to activate a partial union, and then finish his training with Modello. If Devil Union still isn't the strongest in the verse, and there's all these costs to do it, and a high barrier of entry, how is it overpowered? Now this leads to current Asta with his anti-magic Zetten, which is now again everybody's saying is overpowered. But is anti-magic Zetten overpowered? No. What's crazy is that Zetten isn't even anti-magic. Zetten is a technique that can be paired with magic or anti-magic to make it anywhere from 10 to 100 times stronger. Which, if anti-magic needs a separate ability to make itself 10 to 100 times stronger, can we really call it overpowered? If something was overpowered, it wouldn't need a 10 to 100 times amp to get there. But even then, while it has been stated that anti-magic Zetten destroys all magic no matter what, I again believe this is another technical no limits fallacy within Black Clover. Just think of how many times this has been stated and contradicted in the universe of Black Clover. Asta could not negate the ancient demon spell unless he went Union. And even Noct's shadow clones could grab Asta's sword without getting negated because they're that strong and have resistance to power nullification. But even with Zetten, we've seen limitations. For example, we know that anti-magic can negate regeneration. It did this to Veto as it prevented him from healing, but it also stopped Dante from healing his slash as well. But even then, Asta's Zetten anti-magic wasn't enough to negate the healing of the five-headed dragon. He was still limited to the physiology of the dragon's Hydra-like ability that all heads need to be destroyed at once, even though a weaker version of Asta was negating healing from pretty powerful characters in terms of where they were at. So even an anti-magic Zetten is still not completely overpowered because it still can be resisted. So here's the thing, it's still true that Asta has never actually been the strongest character in the series. The only reason he beat Lucifero was because of how nerfed Lucifero was. And even now with Zetten, we have no proof that he's actually stronger than Lucius. He might only just be as strong as It's actually completely possible that Asta could still be just the third strongest character in the series, not even the first. That's even with years of training on top of the anti-magic and stacking a 10 to 100 times multiplier on top of it. Overpowered, a character, ability, or item, etc. that is so powerful, useful, or versatile that it consistently makes all other powerful characters, abilities, or items seem weak, one note, or useless in comparison, with little or no cost to use relative to the power displayed. According to this definition, Anti-Magic was never overpowered. For one, it does not consistently make all other powerful characters, abilities, or items seem weak. We are only starting to get this peak power of Anti-Magic in the last 30 to 50 chapters of the manga, and again, even though Asta is very powerful now, he still has never been the strongest character in the series. There are many times where Asta has struggled to beat opponents, lost to opponents, needed help to defeat villains, or having been defeated by villains even with help. This is a perfect example. Ghosh used Mirror Brigade on Asta, making a dozen additional versions of him by summoning them from the mirror dimension. These 13 Astas were still easily defeated by a casual 50% devil powered Dante. Please tell me how Anti-Magic is overpowered. The second part of my definition has to do with cost, and there is a whole lot of cost to use Anti-Magic. You must forsake your magic power, losing your ability to augment your power, but also never learning to control supernatural energy. You also cannot sense the magic of others, losing your sixth sense. You must live a life of discrimination because of your lack of magic, just to get a heavy sword with dull edges that slows you down when you wield it. Though it does give you a power nullification that lets you destroy any magic, but in order to practically nullify magical attacks, you must still scale to the physical force of the spells, with the added pro that as an anti-magic wielder, nobody can sense you because you lack anti-magic to be sensed, essentially giving you no versatility or mobility, and even the weight of the sword slowing you down until you can go into a quest to find a new one. On top of the plethora of training, you will need to fully develop this power that includes continued physical training, key training, devil rituals, and more key training to learn Zetten. A really good way to look deeper into this is if we look into an alternate scenario. What if Asta had gotten magic instead of a 5th-leaf clover grimoire? Let's say he gets a random-ass 3-leaf clover grimoire with fire magic. We can see that even regular mages with very weak physical stats amplify themselves to be superhuman levels of power, meaning that Asta wouldn't need a giant club as a force multiplier that would weigh him down. Instead, he could just imbue magic into his fist, and it makes him many times stronger without sacrificing speed. And instead, it would just make him far faster as well. He would then have the ability to use Mana Skin, Mana Zone, Mana Method, and many other forms of magic that we all know he would learn because of how hard a worker Asta is. Also, keep in mind that it is stated in canon that the stronger you make your physical body, the stronger your magic becomes. This makes sense because of how interconnected the relationship between mana and life energy is, as it is stated that all mages convert life energy into magic power subconsciously. So if one is physically stronger, they would naturally have more life energy and thus more magic to produce, meaning that Asta's rate of progression if he had magic would be astronomical. If Asta just had fire magic, he would have easily soloed Heath, Mars, and pretty much every villain up until he reaches the villains that have hard counters to magic, and even then Asta would still just find a way. And that was just an example of an average magic. Imagine if Asta was born with the levels of magic power of Julius or Yami, and had time or dark magic, he would actually be completely busted, far stronger than what he currently is with Anti-Magic and Lipa. So I believe I have clearly shown that Anti-Magic was never overpowered. It's a convenient and useful ability, but it's also completely balanced, and it relied on Asta's strength, determination, magic items, and even other forms of energy to make it to what it is today. And even with all that help and support, it still has never made Asta the strongest in the series at any point. Now, I'm not saying that you can't dislike Anti-Magic and Black Clover, but I am saying that using the argument that it is overpowered is just completely wrong. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you to Wanted Dead for the sponsor. Don't forget to use my link in the pinned comment to check out the game, as it will help support our channel and the devs who worked hard in making this super fun game. Hope you guys all have an amazing day. Peace out.